quite interesting for me and rewarding to be able to produce a new album and kind of a new beginning for Darkness Enshroud, as it goes back over 23 years. Originally, Darkness Enshroud was a black ambient ritualistic project based around keyboards, synthesizers, and various other elements, incorporated with a type of black metal vocal, which was kind of parallel to Black Funeral at the time. Winter of Sorrow was the first demo in '93 that actually had a additional member doing kind of vocals at the time, named Daniel Ferguson, or Rahu, and he was actually with me. We partnered in Abyss Productions, or View into the Abyss magazine back in those days. We were in Indianapolis, and Dan, I'd known him for a few years before that, and we started doing the distribution, which he later took off into a successful label in its own right. Darkness Enshroud was signed to Moribund Records, and we issued Ancient Kingdoms in, I think, '94, which was a big step, because at that time you had Abruptum, and then you had the kind of Dark Dungeon synth, or what would become that, in the great project of Mortis. And in France you had the Black Legions, Vlad Tepes, and other projects like Moivat and so forth, which I hadn't heard at the time. It took me years to actually get Moivat, and I liked it. I thought it was great. Black metal, for me early on, was always something which, you have death metal, which has a certain formula and expectation. And early on, the black metal scene, especially in America and Europe being the leading part, I was one of the handful of black metal kind of artists who would, in America at the time. And there were really not many expectations from the genre or the scene, other than, do you sound like Bathory, or you should sound like Bathory, or you should have the Beherit blasphemy sound, which, so Darkness Enshroud was kind of very much the isolated loner in that sense, because it was, a synthesizer thing. After Ancient Kingdoms, which had either atrocious reviews or fanatical reviews, the project evolved as I got better at doing what I do, and unveiled Ghostly Shadows in '96, which for me it was a kind of evolving into a ritualistic dark ambient project. And it was reflecting some of the magical workings in my initiatory path, which began in '93 in a serious formal structure. And Darkness Enshroud continued, produced a couple other recordings, and through most of the 2000s was dormant. I was working in other areas, evolving into different types of artistic expression that way. But in 2016, I had some concepts I wanted to express in recording with Black Funeral again. So Darkness Enshroud essentially was resurrected, risen from the dead, so to speak. Project was supported by Asgore Drakenhoff, my partner in Black Funeral, who you'll know from Drowning the Light, Dark Adversary Productions. And so this album kind of recalls the primal origins of Darkness Enshroud. The album is called Antitrinity, and the Antitrinity is composed or consists of 8 compositions. Asgore actually contributing to the album with 1 track. And Antitrinity is based in the kind of passion that I have for medieval satanic imagery and art. And you'll see that Antitrinity has a very Luciferian foundation as well. This album goes into 8 parts, and it's essentially kind of associated with the basis of the Infernal Trinity. And the Infernal Triad represents and has an association with primal instinct, animalistic lust, knowledge-seeking. But the basis of the recordings and the ritualistic invocations is based in the medieval apocalyptic tradition, beginning in the late Dark Ages, between the 800s and 900s. Actually goes a little bit before that. But I composed these pieces and these Luciferian invocations structured around the Infernal Trinity, which is very much based around the Antichrist tradition. Now, the Antichrist being a combination in the Antitrinity of the 7-headed dragon, or the biblical Satan, the god of this world. You have the 7-headed beast, the Antichrist, son of the devil, the incarnation, the symbolic incarnation, and then the 2-horned beast, false prophet, or the spirit of, quote, evil. So what is that? That is the rejection, it's the recalling of all pre-Christian traits of moderate or reasonable self-pride, self-starting, motivating yourself, not being restricted by or tormented by religious so-called pseudo-authority. So within the 3 parts of Antitrinity, it's a ritualistic invocation. It's a ceremony of self-liberation and embracing the demonic or the primal, the images of horror and power, as they are symbols of strength and balance between those. The art tradition, which I research a lot of different areas. One of my passions of research is the medieval apocalyptic tradition, specifically around the Antichrist. I love the poetry and the presentation that was developed from parts of Revelations, from the Wormwood Star to Apollyon Abaddon, the Abyss, the dragon, 7-headed dragon, or Satan. All of these symbols are beautifully woven in this apocalyptic death rattle, if you will. So the Antitrinity is based around my interpretations of those art and that tradition. From the Beatist tradition, the Dulce Apocalypse, or there's actually around the period of 1271 various traditions of art that came from the Cloisters manuscript is one, depicting the Antichrist, the dragon, the war in heaven, Apollyon rising from the abyss. All of these things have this significant, and they're presented beautifully in a medieval way. One of those I utilized as a sigil is the coat of arms of containing the 3 frogs of the adversary, which comes from 1271 in a painting presented or created for Edward I of England, and it depicts the coat of arms of Satan and the Antichrist, and we utilize that, and that is presented in the art of the recording. So Antitrinity is a ritualistic recording. It is if you could consider what is authentic medieval Satanism or something like that, that would be this recording. Research went through the patterns, the depictions, the symbolism of all of these things, and I created the Antichrist in a musical theme and what that represents. So this album is an invocation of that, a resurrection, if you will. And I'm very pleased to see Dark Adversary Productions. They're going to issue it, and the cover art features me in a coffin, which is actually it's a real coffin owned by a couple friends of mine, Justin and Sabrina, and we went in and did these photos, and the actual pillow I was on in the casket has it was a transport coffin, so it has makeup from the corpse on that, and it was a wonderful thing to do. I plan on doing more recordings with Darkness Enshroud, evolving in different variants of sound, but having that black metal association. I find that a great expression in art. So Antitrinity, as it comes, I advise black metalers, you're either going to hate it or love it, and hopefully you'll be varied enough to understand what's going on with that. Don't expect a black funeral album with this. This is authentic medieval Satanism in that sense. So embrace the spirit, if you will, and Antitrinity has a lot to offer in terms of symbolism, and especially hidden symbolism if you read the lyrics. So that will be out soon, and thank you.